Three little gnomes in the forest. There was once a man whose wife had died, and a woman whose husband had died. And they both had daughters, and the daughters at this time were friends. And so one day the widow said to her daughter's friend, "I think your father and I should marry. I think it would be a good match." So the daughter went home to her father and told him what the widow had said. And her father pondered about this for a long time. For marriage can be a great joy, but can also be very hard work. So, because he couldn't make his mind up, the man took a boot which had a hole in the sole and said to his daughter, "Take this boot, put it up in the loft, and fill it with water. If the water drains out of it, I will stay living as a widower. If the boot holds the water, I will marry the widow." So the daughter took the boot up into the attic. She hung it up on the nail and poured water into it. As she poured water into the boot, the leather swelled so much that it filled the hole, and so all the water stayed inside the boot. And so the man went up into the attic and looked at the boot and saw that, yes, indeed, it was now watertight and was holding all the water. So he went to the widow's house and began to court her, and after some time they married. And the widow said to her new stepdaughter, "Now we are married. You will have milk to wash yourself in and wine to drink, and my daughter will have water to wash herself in and water to drink." And on the first day, this was what happened. But on the second day and every day after, the wife's daughter had wine to drink and milk to wash herself in, but the man's daughter had water to drink and water to wash herself in. And as time went on, the stepmother and the stepdaughter became bitter enemies, for it became clear to the wife that while her stepdaughter was beautiful and caring and hard-working, her own daughter was of a dark heart and lazy and cared only for herself. And there came a day in the depths of winter when the wife made a dress from paper and gave it to her stepdaughter and said, "Put this on, go out into the woods, take an empty basket, and don't come back until you've filled the basket with strawberries. And here, for you to eat as you walk through the woods, is a piece of dry bread." And the maiden looked at her stepmother and said, "But it's cold outside, there is snow on the ground, there will be no strawberries." And the stepmother said, "How dare you talk back to me? Go, and don't come back until the basket is filled with strawberries." So the maiden had no choice but to do as she was told, and she tramped her way through the forest, shivering in her paper dress. And after some time she found a little cottage, and there, peering out of the window, were three little men, three gnomes. And they looked at the maiden, and they opened the door and invited her in. "Come, warm yourself by the stove." So she began to eat the piece of dry bread her stepmother had given to her. And the three little gnomes asked for a piece of her bread each. So the maiden, because she was of good heart, broke the bread in half and shared half her inadequate meal with the gnomes. And they said, "Can you take a broom and just sweep the snow away from the back door?" So she took a broom and swept the snow away, and there, under the snow, were lovely, rich, red, juicy strawberries. So the maiden returned to her stepmother. And after she had gone, the three gnomes said to each other, "What can we give her for being so kind and being so gentle?" And the first gnome said, "She will become more beautiful with every day that passes. That is my gift to her." And the second gnome said, "Whenever she speaks, a gold coin will come out of her mouth. That is my gift to her." The third gnome said, "She will marry a king. That is my gift to her." The jealousy and the rivalry between the two stepsisters intensified with this, for the daughter became more beautiful with each day, and gold appeared from her mouth. So the stepdaughter decided that she too would like to go to the forest, and she too would like to find three little gnomes who had been so generous. So after some time and after much nagging, her mother agreed to let her go. So she gave her daughter a rich fur coat to protect her from the cold, and she went off with the empty basket in search of the little cottage. And when she found it, she simply opened the door and stomped inside and sat herself down by the stove to warm. And the gnomes said to her, "Will you share a little of your meal with us?" For the stepdaughter had bread and butter and a cake. And she said, "There's barely enough here for me. I can't share it with you." Then the gnomes said to her, "Can you sweep some of the snow away from the back door?" And the stepdaughter said, "I'm not your skivvy. You can do your own sweeping." And then she got up and walked out of the cottage and returned home. The three gnomes said to each other, "What shall we give her for being so mean and so rude?" And the first gnome said, "She will grow more ugly with each passing day. That is my gift to her." And the second gnome said, "Whenever she speaks, a toad will jump out of her mouth. That is my gift to her." The third gnome said, "She will die a terrible death. That is my gift to her." So the stepdaughter returned home without any strawberries, and whenever she spoke, a toad jumped out of her mouth. So the stepmother became even more determined to get rid of the fair maiden. So one day she set to dyeing some yarn, the woolen yarn that she had spun. She placed in a cauldron over the fire and boiled it so that it would be dyed a different colour. And she said to her stepdaughter, "Take this yarn, go down to the river and rinse it out." So you rinse the excess dye away. So the fair maiden took an axe, walked down to the river, cut away the ice, and dangled the skein of yarn into the cold river water. And just as she was doing so, a rich carriage drew up, and out of it stepped a king. "What are you doing there?" So the maiden explained to the king that she was rinsing the dyed yarn that her stepmother had given her. And the king was so overwhelmed and so enchanted by her beauty that he took her back to his castle and made her his wife. So they lived happily. And at the end of the first year, well, she's no longer a maid, she's now a wife and a queen. She gave birth to a beautiful, fine, healthy baby son, and their happiness was complete. But of course, word that a prince had been born reached the stepmother and the stepsister. And they went to the castle as if to pay the queen a visit, saying that they were related by marriage. Because the king was out hunting, and because the queen was resting, the stepmother and the stepdaughter picked her up and threw her out of the window into the moat below. And the stepdaughter climbed into the queen's bed and pretended to be her. That night, the kitchen boy was guarding the door to the nursery, where the wet nurse was caring for the infant prince. And to his surprise, he saw a duck waddle along the corridor. And then from out of the duck stepped a figure of the queen, who let herself into the nursery and fed her son. This happened again on the second night. And by the third night, the ghost of the queen said to the kitchen boy, "Tell my husband, when I come tomorrow night, to wave his sword 3 times above my head." So the kitchen boy did as he was bid. And as the king waved his sword 3 times above the ghost of the queen's head, life returned to her. And she told her husband all that had happened. Now that Sunday was the day that their son was baptized. So after the baptism, the king said to the stepmother and the stepdaughter, "What would you do to anyone who tried to kill a queen?" And they said, "We would place them in a barrel, nail the barrel down and throw it in a river." So the king said, "You have pronounced your own sentence." And he did just that. So the third gift from the 3 little gnomes in the forest came to pass. But as for the king, the queen, and the prince, of course they lived happily ever after. Of course. How else would a good story end?